Treasures from Grandma by Arleta Richardson. Illustrated by Jerde. Chapter 6. The Seamstress. Ma, did you remember that we're having an ice cream social at school in 2 weeks? Yes, Ma replied. I remember, and I'll have a cake ready for you to take. Don't worry about it. It's not the cake I was thinking about, I told her. It just came to me that a new dress would be nice. Ma looked up from the bread she was kneading. It would be fine, but I have more projects going now than I can finish in 2 weeks. Your good dress looks all right. How about letting me make it myself? I ventured. I'm sure I could do it. I've watched you sew all my life. I've watched Pa mend harnesses too, but I'm not going to try it, Ma retorted. There's more to making a dress than sewing a seam. It's always nice if it fits when you're finished. I can't learn any younger, I said. At least that's what you and Pa say when you want me to do something. You win, Mabel, Ma laughed. I'll get the patterns out after dinner and see if I have something easy to start on. As soon as the dishes were cleared away, Ma brought her pattern box to the table. Here, I like this one, I said. I don't think you should try pleats, she protested. You don't want anything with little tucks either. They're awfully hard to make even. How about gathers? I could do that, couldn't I? Ma looked doubtful, but after going over all the patterns, she sighed. That seems to be our only choice. I guess there's not a whole lot you could do wrong to a gathered skirt. Sarah Jane was skeptical when I told her that I was making my dress for the ice cream social. You don't have enough patience, Mabel. You know how you hate to take things out and do them over. You'll get tired of that the first day. What makes you think I'll have to take anything out? I protested. I just could have it right the first time, you know. I suppose you could, Sarah Jane conceded. But you'll have to admit it isn't very likely. She was right, of course. I had a habit of finishing things in a hurry and then finding mistakes. Ma was concerned about that too. Let me check each step before you go on to the next, Mabel, she said. If you have to take something out, it will be easier before the whole dress is put together. No one has any confidence in me, I grumbled. Why do you all assume I'll get things wrong? We have nothing but past experience to go on, Ma replied. But don't be discouraged. We learn by our mistakes. If I had learned from every mistake I've made, I'd be twice as intelligent as I am. Ma laughed and went back to her work. Later, when the dress was cut out, I began by putting the skirt together. Straight seams were not difficult, and when I showed them to Ma, she nodded. That's fine. Now pin the bodice together and baste it. We'll see if it needs tucks anywhere. Pin, baste, sew, I muttered. You don't do all that when you make a dress. Neither will you when you've put several hundred of them together, Ma replied. Believe me, you'll save time in the long run. The top of the dress was more complicated. After I had pinned the 2 sections of the back to the front, an extra long piece of material hung at the bottom. These parts don't match, I called to Ma. You must have cut them wrong. She came to look. They aren't cut wrong. You didn't put the darts in the front. I unpinned the pieces and placed the darts where they belonged. Aren't you glad you didn't just sew those together? Ma asked me. Pins are easier to remove than stitches. Ma was right, but I was in no mood to agree. I was already tired of the dress. Finally, I had the bodice basted together and I put it on for Ma to check. But when I went to find her, she had gone out to work in the garden. I can't go out there in nothing but my underskirt and a dress top, I grumbled to myself. And who knows how long before she'll be back? I went back to Ma's bedroom to look in the mirror. The dress certainly looked perfect to me. Why waste time when it was all ready to sew? Ma might be out there for another half hour. I'll just go ahead and sew it up, I decided, and surprise her. Sarah Jane appeared at the door just as I finished the last seam. I thought I'd come and see how you're doing on your dress, she replied. Is it all done? Don't be silly, I replied. I've just started. I do have the sides of the skirt sewed together, and I just finished putting the top together. I whipped it off the sewing machine and held it up for Sarah Jane to see. Doesn't it look nice? There was a silence as she took the piece and stared at it oddly. But Mabel, aren't you supposed to sew the seams on the wrong side of the material? What do you mean? I gasped, snatching it back. Oh no! I didn't turn it wrong side out before I basted it, and I sewed over the basting. What will I do now? You know how much I hate to say I told you so, Sarah Jane snickered, but I guess that you'll have to take it out. I rushed to the window and looked toward the garden where Ma still worked. I can't get all those stitches picked out before Ma comes in, I said. She'll say more than, I told you so. I was supposed to let her look at it before I sewed. Don't stand there moaning, Sarah Jane said. Start working on it. You'll never get it taken apart by having hysterics. Suddenly I spotted Ma's scissors on the table. I'll cut them off, I declared. You'll do what? I'll cut the seams off. Then I can turn it wrong side out and start over. That way she'll never need to know. In all the years I've known you, you've never been able to keep anything from your ma, Sarah Jane told me. You were just not meant to be deceitful, or your ma wasn't meant to be deceived. I was already cutting away the seams. This isn't deceit, I replied. This is survival. I'm learning how to turn my mistakes into intelligence. Put these scraps in the stove, will you? I turned the pieces wrong side out and was pinning them together when Ma came in. My goodness, she exclaimed. Is that as far as you've gotten? Seems to me you were doing that when I went outside. I don't think I should hurry, do you, Ma? I said. I want it to look real nice. Sarah Jane choked and hurried over to the water dipper. I guess I'd better go, Mabel. You've got a big job there, and I wouldn't want to disturb you. She rushed out the door, leaving Ma looking after her in surprise. She didn't stay very long, did she? She stayed long enough, I told Ma, and she'll be back. You can count on that. I sat down with a sigh and prepared to baste the pieces together again. This time I'd let Ma see it before I stitched it on the machine. All right, Ma, I said finally. Is it ready to sew? Ma looked critically at the front. Something doesn't look right, she said with a frown. Come here and let me see the back. I went over to her and turned around. Why, what in the world? She exclaimed. It doesn't come together in the back. Did I cut it too small? She took it off me and turned it wrong side out. How wide did you make the seams? She sat down and looked at it in bewilderment. I can't believe I could have done that. And here I was, talking about your mistakes. Ma was so dismayed that I couldn't stand it. I threw my arms around her neck and cried. You didn't do it, Ma, I sobbed. I did. And I told her what had happened. She put her head down on the table and her shoulders shook with laughter. I don't see what's funny, I sniffed. I can't wear a dress that doesn't meet in the back. Ma wiped her eyes and picked up the bodice. I suppose we could piece it, she suggested. Piece it? I howled. I won't appear at the ice cream social in a dress that's pieced together like a quilt. Ma began to laugh again. That's all the material I have like that, Mabel, or I'd cut another bodice for you. Maybe I can salvage enough for an apron. She rolled up the skirt and top and handed them to me. Put these in my room, please, and set the table for dinner. I could hear her chuckling as she washed and cut up the vegetables. Somehow I felt worse than if she'd scolded me. I know what you mean, Sarah Jane said when I told her the story the next day. If you get scolded, you know you deserve it. But if you get laughed at, you just feel stupid. We walked a little way in silence, then Sarah Jane began to giggle. Your ma's not going to let you make the apron, is she? I glared at her. I was just going to suggest that if she did, the materials would make nice carpet rags when you've finished with it. Sarah Jane ducked and ran up the lane ahead of me. You'd better run, I hollered, or I'll make a carpet rag out of you. End of chapter 6.